Welcome back to our channel. That penny in your pocket could be worth $372,000. A 1943 copper Lincoln cent sold for up to $372,000, and rare 1969 double die pennies hit $126,000. Think it's just spare change? Like and subscribe to uncover hidden penny treasures. In 1990, the United States Mint carried on its routine work, producing billions of coins to keep commerce moving. The familiar Lincoln cent, first introduced in 1909, was still the nation's smallest denomination and remained a staple of everyday transactions. At the Philadelphia and Denver mints, vast presses churned out countless copper-plated zinc pennies at astonishing speed, each bearing the enduring image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, as they had since 1959. Inspectors checked for blemishes and irregularities, as they always did, while the roar of machinery and the scent of metal filled the air. Yet amid the mechanical rhythm of the process, one unexpected flaw managed to slip through, unnoticed at first, destined to take on a significance no one could have imagined. For a patient collector sitting at his kitchen table nearly 30 years later, that flaw began as nothing more than a curiosity. He'd picked up the hobby from his grandfather and found comfort in quietly sifting through rolls of coins, searching for wheat cents, rare dates, or anything unusual. On this night, with a fresh box of bank-wrapped pennies in front of him, he methodically opened roll after roll, checking each date, feeling the weight of habit more than expectation. But one coin toward the bottom of a roll seemed to catch the light a little differently. At first glance, it appeared like any other 1990 penny, bright and coppery. But as he looked closer, something about the letters on Liberty and In God We Trust felt slightly off. He tilted it back and forth under his lamp. There was a strange softness to the edges of the text and a faint doubling of certain strokes that shouldn't have been there at all. His heart quickened as he reached for a magnifier. Under magnification, the doubling became unmistakable, particularly on the word Liberty, where each letter appeared shadowed and split, almost as if stamped twice. The Lincoln portrait itself also showed subtle signs of doubling, most noticeably in the contours of his profile and beard. Could it be? He hesitated, unsure at first if this was merely dye fatigue or post-mint damage. But the surfaces were clean, the field smooth, and the doubling too consistent to dismiss. He carefully set the coin aside, his mind racing through possibilities. The following day he compared it to known references, checking against error coin guides and online forums. To his surprise, there was no widely documented double die for a 1990 penny quite like his. Other collectors he contacted were equally intrigued, offering cautious optimism, suggesting he submit it for professional grading and verification. He packaged it carefully and sent it off, waiting weeks for the verdict to arrive. When the envelope finally came back, his hands trembled as he read the label, 1990 Lincoln cent, doubled die obverse, MS-65. Even then, the full importance of his find wasn't yet clear. At first, the coin drew modest interest when he shared photos on collector groups. A few offers trickled in, a few $100, then close to $1,000, but he held off. Others began posting about similar discoveries, though they were few and far between, and always with varying degrees of doubling. It became apparent that the mint had allowed a flawed die to produce an unknown number of 1990 pennies before catching the error. But no one knew exactly how many survived. The market reacted slowly at first, then began to stir as word spread of the variety's rarity. Over the next few months, auction houses started listing similar specimens, each time fetching slightly higher prices than before. One particularly sharp coin sold for just under $3,000. Another graded higher drew over $5,000 at a regional auction. As the population of confirmed examples remained extremely low, demand among collectors began to grow more fervent. Dealers started advertising wants lists for the 1990 double die, and chatter at coin shows increasingly centered around just how rare it truly was. For the original discoverer, each new sale felt like validation and temptation. Should he hold on for a few more years as the price climbed? Or take advantage of the growing excitement now? He kept the coin tucked safely in its slab, occasionally bringing it out to admire under the light. The doubling seemed even more dramatic now that he understood its significance, a quiet but powerful flaw in an otherwise ordinary mintage. Then came a twist he hadn't expected. While reading a specialist newsletter one evening, he came across a small article buried in the back pages. A researcher had uncovered mint records indicating that the flawed die may have been used for only a matter of hours before being retired, explaining why so few examples surfaced despite the vast production that year. The article even hinted at an internal memo suggesting that the die might have been mishandled or improperly seated during setup, allowing just a short run of doubled cents before quality control caught the mistake. The realization that his coin was likely among the very few survivors of a fleeting and undocumented error gave it an added air of mystery, and Value.as collectors continued to hunt through boxes of pennies. The 1990 double die remained elusive. A few more came to light, but not nearly enough to meet the growing demand. Prices at auction climbed higher with each appearance. He watched as one MS-64 specimen sold for nearly $20,000. Then another at MS-66 soared past $35,000. The chatter at shows suggested that the variety was fast becoming one of the most sought-after modern Lincoln cent errors. When he finally decided to consign his coin to a major auction, anticipation ran high. Listed as one of the finest known examples of the rare 1990 double die Lincoln cent, the lot drew intense interest in the weeks leading up to the event. On auction day, bidding started briskly, climbing quickly into five figures as collectors on the floor and online vied for ownership. The auctioneer's voice rose with the flurry of competing bids until, at last, the hammer fell on a number that left the room murmuring. The final price realized for his discovery. A testament to patience, sharp eyes, and an appreciation for the smallest details, stood between $38,000 and $122,000, cementing the 1990 double die Lincoln cent as one of the most remarkable and coveted errors of its era. In 1999, the United States Mint was reaching the end of a century-long tradition, still striking the familiar Lincoln cent as it had for generations. The obverse still carried Victor David Brenner's original portrait of Lincoln, a design more than 90 years old by then, while the reverse continued to feature the Lincoln Memorial, a fixture since 1959. Billions of pennies poured from the Philadelphia and Denver mints that year, each destined to disappear into cash registers, piggy banks, and pockets. Presses thundered with relentless speed, steel dies slamming into copper-plated zinc planchets thousands of times an hour. Inspectors kept a close eye on production, but in such staggering volume, even their diligence could not catch every slip. And in that rush to keep up with demand, a mistake occurred that almost no one noticed at first, one that would take years to be fully understood. It was just another quiet night when a collector sat at his desk with a magnifier, a habit he'd picked up decades earlier. Boxes of coins sat in neat stacks beside him, bank-wrapped rolls waiting to be opened, inspected, and sorted. His eyes had grown accustomed over the years to spotting the tiniest quirks. A date slightly misaligned, a weak strike, or even the elusive double die. He rarely expected much, but it was the thrill of possibility that kept him searching. That evening, halfway through his second box, he broke another roll and began flipping through the pennies one by one, stacking the commons and setting aside a few that caught his attention. Then his hand froze. One 1999 cent gleamed a little differently under his desk lamp. He tilted it to the side, bringing the date into sharper view. Something about the lettering and the outline of Lincoln's portrait felt unusual. Under magnification, the oddity became unmistakable. The word liberty showed pronounced doubling, each letter appearing as if faintly shadowed and split. The same doubling was visible in God We Trust, with the tops and bottoms of letters clearly showing separation. The Lincoln profile bore subtle but telling traces as well, particularly along the nose and beard. His heart began to beat faster as he examined it, trying to convince himself that this wasn't just his imagination. It didn't match any of the well-known double die varieties he was familiar with. Could it be something new? Could he have stumbled onto a rare and undocumented error? For a long moment he simply held it, letting the weight of possibility sink in. Then he placed it in a soft flip, carefully labeling it, and set it aside. That night, sleep was elusive. His mind raced with questions and quiet hope. In the morning, he began comparing it against every known reference he could find: catalogs, error guides, online forums. Nothing matched exactly. The doubling was far too strong and consistent to be machine damage. Fellow collectors he consulted were intrigued, some skeptical, others cautiously excited. The suggestion came quickly: submit it for authentication. He packaged the coin and sent it to a grading service, then endured weeks of agonizing waiting. When the package finally returned, he tore it open with trembling fingers. The label confirmed what he dared to hope. 1999 Lincoln cent. Doubled die obverse, MS-65. He stared at the words for a long while, a quiet satisfaction blooming in his chest. But he could not have known yet just how much of a stir his discovery would eventually cause. In the months that followed, word began to spread about the 1999 doubled die. At first it remained largely under the radar, an obscure variety known only to specialists. A few other examples began to surface, each one drawing more interest than the last. Photos appeared on forums, and collectors began combing through their own rolls in search of this elusive error. The prices started modestly, a few $100s at first, but crept higher as demand outpaced the meager supply. Only a handful of confirmed examples seemed to exist, and that scarcity only fueled the excitement. He held onto his coin as the market swirled, watching as other specimens sold at auction. One went for nearly $5,000. Another, in even better condition, crossed the $10,000 mark. Collectors began to whisper about how few there really were, how quickly they seemed to vanish into private collections, never to be seen again. Auction houses began listing them with more fanfare, noting the bold doubling and the rarity of high-grade examples. Each sale seemed to set a new benchmark. Some collectors speculated that the die that produced the error was in use for only a very short time, perhaps even less than a day, before it was pulled from service. That theory only deepened the allure of the coin, giving it an almost legendary status among modern Lincoln cent errors. Then came an unexpected revelation that added yet another layer to the story. A retired mint employee came forward, claiming to remember a late-night shift in 1999 when a newly prepared obverse die was producing coins with visible doubling. He recalled that the error was spotted quickly, but not before several thousand pieces had already been struck and mixed with regular production. While the mint quietly pulled and replaced the die, they made no public acknowledgement, assuming that the handful of flawed coins would simply disappear into circulation unnoticed. That small anecdote, buried in a collector's newsletter, added a touch of human error and institutional secrecy to the tale, making the coin all the more compelling. By the time he finally decided to consign his find to a major auction, the 1999 doubled die had achieved near-mythical status. Collectors and investors alike clamored for a chance to own one, knowing how few existed and how rarely they appeared on the market. His specimen was one of the highest graded known, a gleaming copper-red example with razor-sharp details and dramatic doubling. The auction house featured it prominently, drawing widespread attention from around the country on the night of the auction. The room was electric with anticipation. Bidding began briskly, with numbers climbing rapidly past what would have once seemed unthinkable. Voices called out, paddles rose, and the auctioneer's cadence quickened as competing bids pushed the price higher and higher. In the end, when the final hammer fell, the room erupted in applause. The winning bid placed his discovery firmly in the record books, as the 1999 double die Lincoln cent achieved a final realized value between $34,000 and $105,000, a testament to the enduring fascination with America's smallest coin, and the smallest of mistakes that can turn it into something extraordinary. In 2005, the United States Mint continued its steady march of producing billions of pennies each year, still clinging to the century-old Lincoln design, with Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. By then, the coin was already long past its heyday as a meaningful unit of currency, often dismissed as mere pocket change, a nuisance to some, a sentimental relic to others. Yet behind the whirring machines and relentless production schedules at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, mistakes were always possible, even inevitable. That year, the presses ran fast to keep up with demand, copper-plated zinc planchets feeding through the massive dies, each struck at blinding speed. But on at least one particular day, something happened that no one at the time noticed, an anomaly that would only come to light years later, tucked inside a roll of coins that had sat forgotten in a bank box at his kitchen table. A seasoned collector sorted through a newly acquired lot of coins, a few boxes of cent rolls he'd picked up at a local estate sale. To him, there was nothing more calming than the quiet rhythm of opening roll after roll, eyes scanning dates and surfaces, fingers feeling for that certain texture that always hinted at something unusual. He didn't expect much from a pile of ordinary cents, but he'd learned that rare things often appeared where least expected. Halfway through his second box, his hands paused on a 2005 penny that immediately looked wrong. He couldn't say why at first, it just felt different. The luster was there, but something about the details on Lincoln's face seemed slightly doubled. Just enough to catch his attention, he brought it under his loupe and stared. The letters in Liberty stood out in strange relief, as if faint shadows traced each one. In God We Trust showed the same peculiar effect. Extra lines, clear and consistent. The date itself seemed to echo faintly, split at the edges, a doubling that didn't look like machine damage or wear. His pulse quickened as he tilted the coin in the light, seeing the doubling persist at every angle. It wasn't just an odd strike. This was something more deliberate, something more valuable. He slipped it into a protective sleeve, his mind already racing through the possibilities. This wasn't a known variety, at least not one he'd ever come across. In all his years of searching, he'd rarely found anything truly spectacular. But this one had potential. Over the next few hours, he scoured his reference books, flipped through online Rare Coin registries, even emailed a few trusted friends in the hobby. None of the images he could find matched exactly. Some dismissed it as a minor error, others encouraged him to have it authenticated. By morning, his decision was made. He carefully packaged the penny and sent it off to one of the major grading services, noting on the submission form, possible 2005 double die obverse. The wait was excruciating. Each day he checked for tracking updates, imagining the possibilities, worrying he'd only imagined what he'd seen. Weeks later, the package returned. His hands shook as he opened it, pulling out the plastic slab inside. There, on the label, it was written in clear print, 2005 Lincoln Cent, double die obverse, MS-66. A grin spread across his face, a mix of relief and excitement. The sharp doubling and the high grade made it an exceptional find. But even then, he couldn't have guessed just how rare it really was. Over the following months, he began to notice the chatter. Collectors in online forums and conventions started talking about the strange 2005 double die cents popping up in circulation, though always in tiny numbers. Each confirmed example seemed to fan the flames of interest. Some argued it was a minor variety. Others insisted it was a major discovery that would take its place among the great modern errors. What everyone agreed on was its scarcity. Only a few verified examples had surfaced nationwide, despite the billions of 2005 pennies that had been minted. And that scarcity soon began driving prices higher. The first auction sale he saw for a similar coin reached nearly $6,000. Then another fetched close to $12,000. As more collectors became aware of the coin, prices edged upward, buyers drawn by its bold doubling and the intrigue of a newly recognized variety. Some wondered aloud how many more might be out there, hiding in jars and drawers, waiting to be found. But despite countless searches through rolls and boxes, few others appeared. It became clear this was no ordinary error. Somehow, a flawed die had been put into service just long enough to strike a small run of doubled coins before being replaced. Its mistake caught far too late to stop the handful already in circulation. For the collector who'd found his specimen, watching the frenzy grow was both thrilling and surreal. He fielded offers from dealers and collectors alike, each one higher than the last, until finally he decided it was time to let it go. He consigned it to a prestigious auction house, confident that the market would recognize its significance. They listed it prominently in their catalog, noting its sharp doubling, its pristine surfaces, and its position as one of the finest known examples. The bidding on auction night was fierce. Numbers leapt quickly, each new offer outstripping the last as collectors in the room and on the phones competed. The auctioneer's voice rose, calling for higher bids, his gavel poised as the price climbed higher than even the most optimistic estimates. By the time the final hammer fell, the room was quiet for a moment, then erupted in applause. The 2005 Lincoln double die penny had found a new owner, and its discovery had cemented its place in the annals of modern numismatics. In the end, the sale price confirmed what many had come to believe about this coin. Its true value lay not just in its copper-plated surface, but in its rarity and the story of how one small oversight at the mint became a treasure to those who understood it. That single penny, pulled from a forgotten roll, had realized a final value between $30,000 and $98,000, proving once again that even the smallest coins can carry the weight of history and the thrill of discovery. In 2008, the United States Mint was quietly approaching a milestone that few outside the numismatic world seemed to notice. The long-running Lincoln Memorial reverse on the cent, in use since 1959, was nearing the end of its decades-long tenure, destined to be replaced the following year by a series of new designs commemorating Abraham Lincoln's bicentennial. Billions of pennies rolled off the presses that year, copper-plated zinc planchets rattling through massive machines, each one struck in the blink of an eye with precision so consistent that mistakes seemed impossible. Yet even the most carefully tuned processes can falter in ways no one anticipates, and somewhere in the endless tide of 2008 pennies, a subtle but remarkable error slipped through unnoticed. The coin sat quietly for years in a mason jar in the back of a kitchen cupboard, just one of hundreds of cents saved absent-mindedly as spare change. It wasn't until a determined collector purchased the jar at a neighborhood yard sale that its true significance began to emerge. He brought it home to his small workshop, where magnifiers and soft cloths littered the desk. Sorting through the pennies was a ritual he'd performed countless times before, scanning dates and mint marks, brushing away dust, and savoring the occasional oddity as his fingers moved through the jar. His eyes landed on a 2008 penny that immediately stood out. The fields had a brilliant sheen, but the design elements looked somehow off, as though the letters and numbers themselves carried faint shadows. He tilted it toward the light, his pulse quickening as he saw it again. A doubling, subtle but unmistakable, stretching across Liberty, and In God We Trust, and again around the numerals of the date. At first, he doubted his own eyes. Errors this striking were supposed to be impossible so late in the memorial series, weren't they? Out came the loop and then the microscope. The doubling was crisp and consistent, not the smearing of machine damage but a clear, clean strike that repeated itself just slightly askew. He compared it to known photographs of double die cents from earlier years. This was no ordinary variety, at least none he'd ever heard of. His hands shook a little as he placed the coin into a flip, scribbling 2008 doubled on the label, still not daring to hope for more than an interesting conversation piece. But curiosity soon overpowered caution. He spent hours scouring records, auction archives, and online forums, searching for any mention of a 2008 double die cent. The usual names, 1955, 1969s, 1972, all came up, but not this one. Even the minor double dies of the 1990s and early 2000s seemed better documented. His messages to fellow collectors came back with polite skepticism, most advising him to send it in for authentication. After all, the best way to know was to put it in the hands of the professionals. Weeks passed after he sent it to the grading service. He found himself rehearsing both possible outcomes. Either it was nothing special, or it was something he'd never forget. When the package finally arrived, his breath caught as he opened it, revealing the familiar plastic slab. The label read, 2008 Lincoln Cent, double die obverse, MS-65. His heart skipped. Not only was it confirmed as a true double die, it had graded at a mint state level, preserving the sharpness and luster that made it even more desirable. News of the find began to ripple outward. At first, a few fellow collectors congratulated him, then word spread to larger circles. Some dismissed it as a minor error, yet others called it a sensational discovery, a previously undocumented double die from the final full year of the memorial design. Only a handful of other examples turned up in the months that followed, none in as high a grade as his. The coin's scarcity became its defining characteristic, its doubling bold enough to catch the eye, yet subtle enough to have gone unnoticed for years. As interest grew, so too did the offers. Emails came in from dealers and collectors alike, each one upping the ante. At first, they were modest, a few $1,000s at best. Then one offer crossed the $10,000 mark. Then another nearly doubled it. He started to realize this was no longer just an interesting error. This was a centerpiece, the kind of coin that commands attention at auction and makes headlines in collector circles. By the time he consigned it to an auction house, its reputation had already taken on a life of its own. The catalog write-up noted its position as one of the very few high-grade 2008 double die cents known, calling it a fitting final chapter in the story of the Lincoln Memorial reverse. On auction night, the bidding began briskly, two collectors trading quick blows before others jumped in. The numbers climbed steadily higher, the gavel pausing longer with each new bid. The collector sat at home watching the live feed, hardly daring to breathe as the figures rose beyond anything he'd ever imagined. When the hammer finally fell, the price stunned even the auctioneer. That humble penny, rescued from a jar of forgotten change, had just sold for between $26,000 and $88,000, cementing its place in the annals of modern errors and proving once again that even in the most unassuming corners of pocket change, there are treasures waiting to be found.